Step away from that chicken coop. I'm calling 911 right now. That's what Karen screeched at the top of her lungs. She was standing by my fence in the flickering glow of the streetlight, phone pressed tight to her ear as if she'd discovered a crime scene. You won't believe how fast this confrontation spiraled. One moment, she was bellowing about code violations and threatening me with a lawsuit. The next, she was speechless, staring in disbelief when the law took a turn she never expected. My name is David Ellison. I'm a 36-year-old agricultural researcher turned urban farmer. Before I dive into how this astonishing standoff began, I want to thank you for clicking on today's video. If you've ever dealt with an overzealous HOA board member or a neighbor who insists on calling the cops over the slightest noise, trust me, you'll want to keep watching. The story reveals just how far one entitled individual can push and why standing your ground can pay off in ways you never imagined. Now, let's get straight to the heart of the drama. My home is in a suburban development called Meadowcrest Hills. I settled here about a year ago to give my daughter Lily a stable environment after we lost my wife to a rare disease. The property came with a decent backyard, enough space to grow vegetables, raise a few chickens, and fulfill the promise I'd made to my late spouse. She'd wanted Lily to understand where real food comes from. She believed hands-on experience cultivating plants and caring for animals would shape our daughter into a resilient, compassionate soul. The first few months were peaceful. Lily and I built raised beds, set up a modest chicken coop, and planted seedlings. My neighbors initially seemed curious or politely indifferent. A few even stopped by to drop off housewarming gifts. However, I soon learned about the Homeowners Association's formidable chairperson, Karen Wallace. Her reputation for meddling, micromanaging, and handing out violations was legendary. Word around the neighborhood was that she had no tolerance for unconventional lawns, kids who played too loudly, or anything that disrupted her sense of order. At first, Karen's presence was just a distant rumor. She seldom appeared on my street. I had only caught glimpses of her tall frame striding purposefully to her SUV, usually holding a folder stuffed with papers. Then, small annoyances began to occur. A letter in my mailbox listed obscure HOA bylaw references about suspicious structures. Another notice warned me about unauthorized livestock. Both bore the HOA logo, accompanied by the name K. Wallace as the board president. Couldn't tell if these were official communications or personal vendettas disguised as such. They were typed in an overly formal style, citing codes that seemed archaic and possibly fabricated. I tried to remain calm. My chickens, Henrietta and Finch, were well within the local ordinance guidelines. I had double-checked city codes that allowed up to 4 hens, provided the coop was kept clean. My yard met the square footage requirement. My neighbors on either side had no issues with occasional clucking. Still, the letters kept coming, each more threatening than the last. It was as though Karen wanted to test my patience, waiting for me to break or comply with her demands. Lily, 8 years old, picked up on the tension. She heard me grumbling under my breath whenever I found another letter on the porch, sometimes titled "Final Warning" or "Second Notice." One day she asked if she'd done something wrong by naming the chickens or painting cheerful flowers on our coop. That question hit me hard. I assured her that none of it was her fault. If anything, the coop mural, our bright design of daisies and sunflowers, made the yard more beautiful. Weeks went by with no face-to-face confrontation, just ominous notes and the occasional glimpse of Karen taking photos from her SUV. Then Lily came home from school sobbing because a boy in her class, apparently Karen's nephew, had teased her, "Your dad's a barnyard freak, and my aunt says you two are getting kicked out." This taunt lit a spark in me. My daughter was not going to be bullied. If Karen had a problem, she needed to speak with me directly. That evening, I installed a couple of security cameras around the property. I wasn't wealthy. My career shift from corporate agriculture to a smaller research institute had cut my income drastically, but I felt this was essential. Some neighbors had suggested I gather evidence. If Karen escalated to legal threats, I'd have footage to protect myself. Lily, curious about the process, helped me attach a small camera above the coop door. She liked the idea of catching bad guys, even though I hoped we'd never need the recordings. The turning point came 2 weeks later. It was nearly 8 p.m. Lily was reading on the couch when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Karen standing there, arms folded, wearing a crisp blazer as if she'd just walked out of a corporate meeting. She handed me a piece of paper. Cease and desist, unauthorized agricultural activity. The heading was bold. The rest of the text was a hodgepodge of jargon. Karen looked triumphant. She smiled that pinched lip smirk I'd heard about but never seen. Your property is in violation of multiple HOA regulations, she declared. You have chickens, which is not permissible. Your backyard layout disrupts the uniform appearance mandated by our rules. I suggest you remove them or prepare for serious fines. She paused, her eyes flicked to the side, possibly checking if any neighbors were watching. And if you think I'm bluffing, I'm not. I have the authority to escalate this. I'd done my homework. My city explicitly allowed up to 4 hens, no roosters, so I calmly told her so. Karen's expression tightened. She insisted that her HOA regulations superseded city law. That was nonsense, and I politely disagreed. She huffed, thrust the paper into my hand, and stated she'd be back with the necessary paperwork to have me evicted if I didn't comply. Then she stormed off, high heels tapping the walkway so loudly that Lily peered through the window, looking frightened. That night, after I calmed Lily's worries, I called an old friend named Natalie. She was a junior attorney with some experience dealing with neighborhood disputes. She urged me to document everything meticulously. Because I'd already installed cameras, I felt a bit more secure. Natalie also suggested I quietly check the official HOA bylaws. Perhaps Karen was adding new rules under the radar. It wouldn't be the first time an overzealous board member twisted guidelines to serve their personal preferences. Over the next week, I found more signs that Karen was orchestrating a smear campaign. Flyers titled "Stop the Farm Madness" popped up at local coffee shops. One version claimed my co-op was a haven for rodents. Another argued that my compost bin would attract pests carrying disease. They featured grainy photos that appeared doctored, my yard in disrepair, trash scattered around. But it was all fake. I recognized the angle from which the shots were taken. It looked like she'd used a zoom lens from behind a fence or bush. Lily's school friends asked her if the rumors were true. She got so upset that I considered shutting down the entire endeavor for her sake. Yet I recalled why I started this farm: to honor my wife's dream, to teach Lily resilience and self-sufficiency. Giving up felt wrong, so I redoubled my efforts to maintain impeccable cleanliness, even filming daily to show how neatly we cared for the coop. I posted a few short clips online under the title "Urban Farm Myths Busted," hoping to counter the negative narrative with facts. During this period, a handful of neighbors came forward to share that Karen had similarly harassed them. One had installed solar panels on their roof. Karen wrote them up for aesthetic disruptions. Another had built a wheelchair ramp for a disabled relative. Karen demanded they remove it because it wasn't in her color scheme. Hearing these stories fueled my determination. The woman was on a power trip. If no one had stopped her before, maybe I needed to step up. One late afternoon, Lily and I were out back watering vegetables, lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, when we saw Karen on the other side of the fence, phone in hand. She was muttering, snapping photos. Lily clung to my side, anxious. I walked over to greet her calmly. Karen scowled and practically snarled. "I'm recording evidence of your violations. I hope you're ready for the fine." I asked what specific bylaw we were violating. Since we adhered to every city requirement, she just sniffed in disdain. She refused to elaborate. Then she pivoted, marched away, and the tension lingered long after she was gone. I decided enough was enough. Over the next days, I took photos of my immaculate backyard, the healthy hens and the well-managed compost bins. I gathered municipal ordinances that permitted small-scale agriculture. I documented each threatening letter and recorded every phone call with Karen. The more evidence I collected, the stronger my case became. I even visited City Hall, meeting a helpful clerk who confirmed that the official HOA documents on file allowed limited agricultural projects, provided they met local health standards. This contradicted every letter Karen had sent me. The quiet neighbor, Troy, let me know that Karen had roped up a few board members into backing her stance. Apparently, she promised them some shady perks. They'd scheduled a secretive HOA emergency session to discuss my illegal farm. I found out last minute and crashed the meeting. When I walked in, binder in hand, Karen's face froze. She'd been in the midst of explaining how my vermin-infested coop endangered children. I calmly placed my evidence on the table, photos, city code references, and a statement from a local veterinarian praising my hen's health. She tried to maintain her composure. Her cheeks reddened as she realized her accusations were disintegrating, but she clung to the idea that her custom HOA bylaw outranked local regulations. I asked for official proof of any such clause. The silence that followed was deafening. None existed in legitimate form. Nevertheless, two board members simply deferred to Karen, claiming precedent. Furious, I recognized they were deferring to her intimidation tactics. However, I refused to back down. That meeting ended inconclusively, but I left with a small sense of triumph. Some attendees shook my hand, thanking me for bringing actual facts. Within days, Karen escalated from petty threats to open hostility. My trash cans were knocked over multiple times. Lily's chalk drawings by the sidewalk were scrubbed away with a bucket of soapy water someone had clearly poured. Then, in the dead of one night, my motion sensor camera caught a figure messing with my garden. The next morning, I discovered the irrigation lines cut. Furious, I played back the footage. The hooded figure was of similar build to Karen's teenage nephew, though not 100% clear, and he snipped each hose meticulously. That footage unfortunately didn't reveal a face, but it gave me stronger motivation to contact the police. I filed a report. The officer I spoke to was sympathetic, but said they'd need more definitive evidence to press charges. To manage the repeated sabotage, I installed additional spotlights with motion activation. Lily helped me test them. We found a little bit of delight in how bright they were. It's like we're protecting a treasure, she said, which broke my heart a bit, because it was true. This small farm was a treasured piece of her mother's legacy. A few days later, something astonishing happened. Karen apparently told one of the neighbors that she was planning an official inspection with county authorities to prove I was a public hazard. The following morning, sure enough, a man wearing a polo shirt and slacks approached with Karen in tow. He claimed to be from the county zoning office, demanded to see the coop. I asked for his ID. He hesitated, rummaging in his pockets, then admitted he was actually Karen's cousin, not a zoning official. I'm just volunteering to help, he said lamely. That was trespassing by deception, so I politely told them to leave. Karen turned red with indignation, hissing that I was digging my own grave. Lily peeked through the window, terrified. I captured the entire encounter on my phone. Incensed, I sent that video to my attorney friend Natalie, who found it invaluable. This shows premeditated harassment, she remarked. She's impersonating county officials. Let's keep piling on these records. Natalie recommended I maintain a chronological list of every incident, however small. Meanwhile, Lily grew fearful. She'd ask if Karen would come in the middle of the night to hurt our animals. That question stung. I tried to reassure her, but my own nerves were frayed. One sweltering afternoon, Karen publicly berated me in front of a few neighbors, screaming that my property value sabotage would be the end of me and that she had every right to forcibly remove the co-op. She began snapping dozens of photos while standing on the property line, accusing me of storing chemical pollutants in my shed. In reality, I only kept standard fertilizer. Lily was inside, peering out the window again. That sight of her wide, worried eyes pushed me to remain calm, though inwardly I was seething. I decided a more proactive approach was needed. I reached out to the local agriculture extension office, explaining that I had an urban micro farm and an HOA dispute. By chance, they had a part-time outreach program. An official named Felix offered to come inspect the place to confirm it was sanitary and legally compliant. Felix arrived with a clipboard and tested the soil, reviewed the condition of the coop, admired Lily's painted flowers on the walls. He was impressed. "This is a model example of small-scale sustainable farming," he said, giving me a formal letter of support. He even mentioned a new county initiative that might be hiring inspectors who had a background in agricultural science. Heron, seeing him exit my property, stomped over, demanding to know who he was. Felix calmly introduced himself as an official from the extension office and told her point blank that my operations were fully legitimate and beneficial to the community. Her face turned beet red. She flung out a series of accusations about rodents and odor, all of which Felix disproved on the spot. She stormed away, furious, leaving me with a sense that the tension was reaching a dangerous peak. That evening, in a final push, I decided to email the entire HOA board with my evidence: the city's ordinance, the letter from the Agriculture Extension Office, photographs of my pristine coop, plus the video of Karen's cousin impersonating an official. I concluded by stating that I was prepared to pursue legal action if the harassment didn't cease. The next morning, the board president, who was also Karen, ironically, sent a mass reply threatening defamation lawsuits and substantial penalties. It was an empty but loud retort. Days passed in a haze of uneasy calm. Lily and I continued our daily routine, collecting eggs, watering plants, journaling the farm's progress. She'd become quite attached to Buttercup, the friendliest chicken who would trot up to her for treats. I clung to that daily normalcy, even as a storm brewed behind the scenes. Then came the incident that changed everything. One weekend, we hosted a small farm day for Lily's classmates and parents. It was a modest gathering. We taught the kids how to plant seeds, showed them how composting worked, and let them feed the hens. Everybody seemed delighted. Except Karen. She lurked near the sidewalk, tapping her foot impatiently. Suddenly, she whipped out her phone. I heard her raise her voice. "Hello, 911. There's a major disturbance here. I see unsafe conditions with children involved." My jaw nearly dropped. I told the parents not to panic. I had nothing to hide. We went about our demonstration until the police arrived. Two officers stepped out of their cruiser, calm but alert. Karen rushed to them, pointing wildly at my yard. "He's running an unauthorized business. He's exposing minors to hazardous waste. Arrest him." She was trembling with indignation. Lily stood behind me, clutching my shirt. The officers walked around, interviewed several parents, checked my yard, and found no issue. One policeman gave me a sympathetic nod. It was obvious this was a false report. He told Karen that everything seemed fine, and that if she kept making such calls, she could face repercussions for misusing emergency services. That's when the tide turned against her. She realized the police were not on her side, and her furious expression betrayed her frustration. She tried to argue, but the more she insisted, the more the officers exchanged skeptical glances. They took my statement about prior harassment. Upon hearing about her impersonation scheme and intimidation attempts, one officer began writing notes asking if I'd be willing to provide supporting evidence. I gladly offered my binder of documentation. Karen's face paled. For once, she seemed at a loss for words. We all parted ways that afternoon, but Karen apparently wasn't finished. She railed on the neighborhood's social media group that evening, labeling me a fraud, a menace, a plague on our property values. She wrote that I was going to poison the entire block with my contaminated compost. A handful of supporters chimed in, but many neighbors also shared their positive experiences with my farm day event. Some people realized Karen was exaggerating or flat out lying. Her credibility began to crumble. In the ensuing week, the police actually followed up. An officer named Barnes called to request any security footage or photographic proof of Karen's harassment. I provided everything, including logs of her late-night prowling, the cousin's fake inspection attempt, and the sabotage to my irrigation lines. Even though the figure wasn't definitively identified, it supported the pattern of aggression. My phone call with the officer felt like a lifeline. For once, someone in authority was taking me seriously. Karen must have sensed the walls closing in, because that's when she launched her final salvo. She convened another emergency HOA meeting, ignoring official protocols for scheduling. She claimed to have discovered evidence that I was harboring diseased animals. A handful of residents who disliked any form of livestock showed up, while others came to watch the drama. I arrived with Lily, armed with official veterinary records. Karen laid out a set of photographs on the table. They showed sores on chickens that weren't mine. In fact, the breed didn't even match. The audience murmured in confusion. I stepped forward, displayed recent photos of my healthy hens, then produced the vet's documentation verifying they were disease-free. Karen's entire argument collapsed. She tried to pivot to another attack, calling me a shameless troublemaker, but the neighbors were no longer convinced. They'd seen the endless letters, the frantic 911 calls, the doctored images. One woman commented that it was the same pattern Karen had used to harass other families for minor design violations. Another man confronted Karen, asking how many times she'd filed false complaints. The temperature in the room soared. Karen, losing composure, shouted that she was the only one protecting property values. That refrain fell flat, met with rolled eyes and a few sarcastic laughs. Just as tension peaked, Officer Barnes quietly entered the room, having been invited by a concerned board member. He asked to speak with Karen privately. Everyone went silent, watching as they stepped to a corner. She looked flustered, shaking her head. Then Barnes returned to address the room. He calmly explained that an ongoing investigation was examining multiple incidents of harassment and falsified documentation. A hush fell. Karen's face drained of color. She tried to speak, but Barnes told her to remain silent until the process was complete. I stood there, absorbing the shift. Months of intimidation had boiled down to this bizarre showdown. Karen, who had always brandished the rules like a weapon, now found herself under scrutiny. The crowd began dispersing as she slipped out the door, refusing to meet my gaze. Lily was by my side, relief evident on her face. Yet I remained cautious. Some bullies lash out desperately when cornered. Days later, a subpoena arrived for Karen to appear in a formal hearing. She erupted in a last-ditch online rant, branding me a scammer with government ties. She even claimed I bribed officials for that agricultural extension letter. The vitriol was so absurd that it mostly fell on deaf ears. Meanwhile, more neighbors started to come around, visiting my yard to see the truth for themselves. They realized my little operation was no threat. Some even admired the sweet hens roosting in their coop, greeted them with gentle coos. Lily beamed whenever someone complimented her floral artwork. Then the real bombshell dropped. The county agriculture department offered me a chance to become a part-time inspector, citing my research background and the thoroughness of my documentation. They'd followed the local drama and saw in me a candidate who could help other urban farmers navigate city ordinances. When I informed Lily, she squealed with excitement. Karen's worst fear was coming true. I'd be in a position to officially sanction or deny claims like hers. At that point, rumors emerged that Karen had a hidden motive. She was working closely with a real estate firm eager to buy up properties at lower prices, convert them into luxury condos. If my farm was labeled a nuisance, I might sell in frustration. Then she could profit from commissions. This speculation gained traction when an anonymous neighbor leaked emails showing Karen's interactions with a developer. Folks realized she wasn't just neurotic about rules, she was after financial gain, and my urban farm threatened her carefully laid plans. Around the same time, the police concluded enough evidence existed to charge Karen with filing false reports. They also flagged potential fraud regarding HOA funds. Turns out, she'd been diverting association money into suspicious accounts labeled community enhancement, which primarily covered her personal expenses. My documents, plus statements from other residents, painted a damning portrait. She was about to face serious consequences. The climax arrived on a sunny Saturday. Lily and I were doing minor yard work when Karen marched up to the fence, phone in hand, and began yelling about a final warning. I turned on the camera, determined to remain civil. She then threatened to call the authorities again, declaring I was storing illegal chemicals. Only this time, before she could finish, two police cars rolled down the street, lights flashing softly. Officer Barnes stepped out, holding a file of papers. Karen's expression mutated from smug to terrified in a heartbeat. Barnes approached her with a professional but firm demeanor. Miss Wallace, I have a warrant for your arrest on multiple charges, including fraud, misuse of HOA funds, and false police reports. Karen's mouth hung open in shock. She stammered, glancing at me as though I'd betrayed her. Even though I owed her nothing, Lily watched from behind me, eyes wide with a mixture of concern and relief. Karen tried to protest, claiming she was the real victim, that I'd orchestrated a smear campaign. Yet Barnes calmly recited the charges, handcuffed her, and led her toward the squad car. The entire block witnessed it. Some onlookers filmed the scene. Others just watched silently, no one stepping forward to defend her. She stared at me, as if blaming me for all her woes. But I felt neither guilt nor triumph. Just an overwhelming sense of release. It was as though a massive weight had been lifted from my home. Billy asked softly, "Is it over?" I nodded, gently patting her shoulder. "I think so, kiddo. We can focus on our garden now." Moments later, as Karen was placed in the back seat, she finally realized she had no more power in this situation. Whatever final remarks she wanted to make never surfaced. For once, she was speechless, her silence more profound than any scream she'd unleashed before. With Karen gone, the fallout was quick. She was stripped of her HOA position, a new board was formed, people with more balanced views. They inspected my coop one final time, concluded it fully complied with every standard. The agricultural menace label that Karen had tried to pin on me vanished in an instant. Neighbors became more supportive. Some apologized for standing idly by. As for Lily, she gained new friends. Parents who attended that ill-fated farm day realized we had a wonderful environment. They began bringing their kids over to feed the chickens and learn about planting seeds. I took the part-time inspector job with the county, using my story as motivation to help others who faced similar harassment. I visited small urban gardens, made suggestions on compliance, and taught families how to protect themselves from baseless claims. Each time, I recalled how powerless I once felt and how crucial documentation had been. With Karen's reign toppled, the neighborhood found new unity. The HOA allocated funds to replant communal flower beds and fix neglected amenities. People chatted openly, forging connections that had been stifled under her watch. Lily thrived, becoming more outgoing, inviting classmates to see the colorful co-op. Buttercup was a star attraction, even featured in a short local news segment about urban farming done right. Though Karen eventually faced legal consequences, including fines and potential jail time, my focus turned to healing. I wanted Lily to remember this experience not just as a traumatic confrontation with an overbearing neighbor, but as an example of perseverance and the importance of standing up for truth. We added a small plaque to the garden in memory of my wife, who dreamed of a close-knit community. On it, we wrote a simple line: "Love grows best when nurtured daily." That phrase captured the essence of everything we'd endured. On the 1 year anniversary of moving into Meadowcrest Hills, we hosted another farm gathering, this time with the full blessing of the freshly appointed HOA board. Kids ran around giggling, some painting their own murals on a designated co-op section. Parents sipped lemonade as I talked about composting and water conservation. The mood was a complete reversal of that tense day when Karen called 911 trying to portray me as some lawbreaker. A local reporter covering community stories joined us for a short interview. She asked, "How does it feel to see your farm become such a unifying space after all that conflict?" I glanced at Lily, who was proudly showing another child how to hold Henrietta gently, and I smiled. "It feels like justice, with a dash of hope." We stood firm and the truth came out. The reporter nodded, clearly sensing the bittersweet undertones. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the houses, Lily tugged my sleeve and beckoned me toward the coupon. She pointed at a new egg Buttercup had laid, glinting softly in the last rays of daylight. "This is the best part," Lily whispered, as though sharing a sacred secret. "Just living here with our chickens, growing stuff, and not being scared anymore." Her words pierced my heart. I ruffled her hair gently, gratitude filling me. That night, after everyone left, we sat on the porch together, sipping homemade iced tea. The air was warm, a gentle breeze rustled the rows of lettuce and the bright blossoms in our vegetable patch. In that moment, I silently thanked my wife for guiding us to a place where we could cultivate not only fresh produce, but also resilience and community spirit. The months of tension and intimidation had tested us, yet we emerged stronger. Karen's silence after the police turned on her became the exclamation point to a saga of pettiness and bullying. It reminded everyone that power trips often crumble under the weight of factual evidence. No matter how loud someone shouts, if they're lying, that roar can't last indefinitely. Soon enough, it collapses under real accountability. In the weeks following her arrest, I discovered that several families who'd been quietly bullied by Karen were finally breathing easier. One neighbor resumed building a handicap-accessible ramp for their aging parent without fear of incurring Karen's wrath. Another felt safe installing the solar panels they'd always wanted. The sense of renewal spread like a beneficial fungus in a well-tilled garden. People started exchanging gardening tips, talking about potlucks, and forging friendships that previously felt impossible under Karen's iron fist. As for Lily, her transformation was the greatest reward. She conquered her anxiety, spoke proudly about the farm in her school presentations, even organizing a tiny farmer's market stand for the local kids. She'd beam when mentioning how eggs from our co-op tasted better than any store-bought kind. And she never once expressed regret about the swirling conflict that had overshadowed our first months in Meadowcrest Hills. Instead, she saw it as proof that good can triumph with persistence and honesty. Neighbors occasionally recounted how Karen glared whenever she passed by in her car, but any threat she posed had dissolved. She no longer possessed the power or credibility to carry out her demands. The final mention I heard was that her real estate connections had dried up. No one wanted to partner with someone who had a record of fraudulent behavior. Meanwhile, the rest of us thrived in a more open, cooperative atmosphere. Throughout that process, I recalled something my wife told me before she passed. If you do what's right, even if it's hard, Lily will learn to be brave just by watching you. That line echoed in my thoughts every time I dreaded the next escalation from Karen. In the end, that principle guided me. I meticulously documented every intimidation attempt and never stooped to her level of hostility or deceit, and though it took time, that approach proved its worth. By the start of summer, the vegetables were flourishing. Our carrots, peppers, and tomatoes resembled a rainbow of fresh produce. Lily's mural on the coop had expanded, featuring butterflies and swirling vines. Buttercup and Henrietta clucked contentedly, sometimes perched on Lily's shoulder as she strolled around the yard like a proud little farmer. We added a small wooden bench near the raised beds, a spot where visitors could sit, admire the greenery, and ask about our farming methods. At this point, I'd begun my part-time role as an agricultural inspector. It felt surreal stepping onto other properties to help resolve their gardening issues, bridging the gap between local regulations and creative, eco-friendly living. Every time someone worried about HOA interference, I recounted my own ordeal, encouraging them to keep solid records, learn the real bylaws, and never be bullied into surrender. That personal experience lent me credibility and empathy. Homeowners who felt cornered realized they weren't alone. One bright morning, Lily and I decided to host a brief live stream showing how we collected eggs, explaining to viewers how composting cut down on waste. We teased a future segment about building your own drip irrigation system with reclaimed materials. Comments poured in, some praising our resilience, others sharing that they too had faced Karen-like figures. A few asked if we'd do more detailed tutorials. Lily beamed at the camera, proud that our little farm now inspired others. After the live stream ended, Lily set the phone down and whispered, "Mom would be happy we didn't back down, right?" I squeezed her shoulder gently, telling her I was certain her mother would be bursting with pride. That single sentence summed up the entire journey. Despite adversity, heartbreaking intimidation, we preserved something precious. We honored the promise made to a loved one, and we taught ourselves that principles must be defended no matter how daunting the opponent might appear. Time passed, and the memory of Karen's final stand slowly turned into a neighborhood anecdote, retold at block parties or in casual conversations. People would sometimes say, "Remember when the HOA lady tried to shut down David's farm? Crazy times." They'd chuckle, then look around at the blossoming gardens and realize how a change in leadership had allowed the community to flourish. Indeed, the entire subdivision started to adopt greener practices. Some folks replaced water-hungry lawns with native plants, while others launched small-scale herb gardens on their patios. One evening, Lily and I were invited to a potluck organized by neighbors who once supported Karen out of fear. They admitted how relieved they were to see her influence end. Over homemade casseroles and freshly baked bread, we bonded over the topic of second chances. How any neighborhood can transform into a place of warmth and cooperation if people stand together against intimidation. Children ran through the yard, chasing each other with laughter, reminding me that we had turned a corner. Occasionally, I wonder if Karen will attempt a comeback, though the legal consequences she faced were severe. I've heard rumors that she plans to sell her property, move elsewhere, and start fresh. If that's the case, all I can do is hope she learns not to abuse positions of authority. As for me, I've grown more confident and less fearful. Once you've stared down a tyrant in your own backyard, you discover a reservoir of tenacity you never knew you had. What matters most is that Lily is thriving academically and emotionally. She's building her own identity around caring for living things, something her mother dearly wanted. Every new sprout in our garden feels like a testament to the resilience we discovered, and every new hen that joins our flock, because we've expanded slightly, represents hope. While the journey was painful, the conclusion demonstrated that truth eventually prevails when you stand by your convictions. It also proved that a small farm can be more than just a place to grow food. It can be a sanctuary for a family's dreams, a classroom where a child learns about life, and a testament to the idea that communities function best when neighbors look out for each other instead of resorting to harassment. Now, as I finish telling this story, I want to thank you for sticking around. If you've enjoyed hearing how an impossible battle with an HOA tyrant turned into a victory for everyone but the tyrant, please let me know in the comments. Hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life tales, and feel free to share your own experiences with meddlesome neighbors. Remember, if you stand up for what's right, especially when it's backed by evidence and integrity, you can change the narrative in your community. You can transform adversity into unity. Looking over at Lily this very moment, I see her gathering eggs and humming a cheerful tune. Ever so often, she glances toward the short wooden plaque reminding us of the promise made to a woman who loved gardens and believed in teaching children to respect nature. That garden plaque stands for more than just a memory. It stands for courage in the face of threats, for compassion in the face of cruelty, and for the unwavering hope that a single seed of kindness can outgrow a forest of hostility.